Hello and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, A Rich Comic Life. My name is Richard Gill and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 comedians over the last 47 years. My guest today is the great comedian, it's Mr. Aaron Simmons. Yay! Hello mate, how are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. I've never had such an enthusiastic applause from one person. Thank you very much.
Well, it's well deserved.
Thank you.
You're a very funny man. Right, so we're going to chat for about the next
Yep.
45 minutes to an hour about your career in comedy, and I'd like to go right back to the start and ask you, how did you become a comedian in the first place?
So, I think what will not be unique amongst the people that you've interviewed is that I listened to the Comedian podcast with Stuart Goldsmith. That was the first sort of kernel of the idea that I could do it, and like these people, like every episode of that, well, not every episode, but a lot of those episodes were like, I was just a guy that I was quite funny, and I went to an open mic night and saw that they were all rubbish, and I thought, oh, well, I can do at least better than that. So then I tried it, and I turned out to be better than the original open micer. And then I thought, oh, well, if I do an open mic, I'll either be good and I can carry on doing it, or I'll inspire somebody else to start comedy.
Good plan.
So there was that kernel idea just there, and then I was in kind of a regressive is not kind of the, like kind of a introverted relationship. She was an introvert, and I had quite a restrictive hobby before I was a comedian, and so I wouldn't eat it. Like I had a very strict diet. I wasn't drinking, wasn't smoking, didn't do anything fun, and I broke up with her, and I thought, what's the stupidest thing that I could do? And I thought it was either comedy or bungee jump. And I chose comedy.
Good man.
As well. The first gig was scarier.
Wow. Can you describe your first gig? Can you remember it?
Yes, I can, quite clearly. July 2014. It was at the Lion's Den in Piccadilly Circus.
Right.
And it doesn't run anymore, but basically you had to pay £4, and you could just go. Everyone paid £4, and then you went up and said, I want to do it, and you did 5 minutes. And I remember going there, so nervous. So like, I am quite. So before as a comedian, before I started comedy, I was a personal trainer and so like food was like so regimented, so important to me at that point in my life, and that I brought dinner with me. It's the first time I've ever been so nervous I couldn't eat. Like I got halfway through it and I was just like, I'm not hungry anymore.
Wow.
Which was bizarre to me. Went on, did my 5 minutes of material, probably in about 2.5, 3 minutes. Just sort of spat it out as quickly as possible. I remember getting a couple of laughs, and I remember there being a point where I realised I hadn't put a joke in where there needed to be a joke. And going, you can't just say something, there needs to have an ending, and then improvising something. It wasn't a big laugh, but it was just the fact that I recognised that wasn't there, and I needed to fix that. Whilst on stage, I went, oh, I can do this. And I remember, so I was in this comedy club. I didn't want people to know it was my first time. So I was in this comedy club by myself, just sort of keeping it all about, trying to act all cool after I got off stage. Like, yeah, I do that all the time. Yeah, it's not big enough. And then I went straight from Piccadilly Circus straight onto the tube. And again, you can't be sort of loud and obnoxious on the tube. People would hate you. So I was very insular. And then I got to the station where I parked, and it was a big old hill. And people won't know this necessarily. Oh, By the way, there'll be sirens all the way through this.
There's sirens here as well, don't worry.
Okay, great. You also live in Compton in the 90s. No, there we go.
Yeah, you go. Yeah. All right, on cue.
It's actually the same car. It's travelled from my. We're just in the same room. This isn't done overseas. Anyway, so people might not know, but I'm a wheelchair user, and so there was this massive hill from the station down to the car park, and I just screamed my head off about how I was going to be a comedian and it was the best thing in the world. And I went past 4 separate people who all did a double take of this, like, guy in his mid-20s screaming his head off about how he was a stand-up comedian, even though he couldn't stand up. And
that is brilliant. What a perfect story.
It's not bad.
That is brilliant. I had a go at being a stand-up comedian once. I wanted to get it out of my blood because I've seen so many stand-ups over the years. I thought I can have a go at this, and I've told a lot of comedians this story. I knew a promoter, and he said, "Yeah, go on. It's a gong show for old folk." And I walked out. I had this script rehearsed, and the first thing I said to them was, people used to think I looked like Eddie the Eagle Edwards, the ski jumper, and of course I'm his double, but I can't see the resemblance myself. And one bloke at the back just told me to fuck off, and I walked off gonged off to the sound of my footsteps. And it was criminal. But I had another go, similar thing happened, and I said to the promoter, I think my place is in the audience.
Sure.
And that's why I've been supporting you all ever since. What do you like to talk about when you're on stage?
It's interesting. The phrasing of the question is the interesting one for me, because when I first started comedy, it was, let's tell some jokes about being disabled, because that sets me apart, and that's, it affects my life, and I can't go on stage and not talk about it, because I can't talk about my life without reference to that, because if I go to the cinema with my girlfriend and the girl behind the counter thinks that she's my carer or she's my mum, like, obviously that's funny and I'm going to talk about it. But the longer that I've done comedy for, and without trying to sound wanky, it'll come across naturally, I'm sure, I know I can be funny now, and it's now, there has to be some substance behind it. And, with this latest Edinburgh show that I'm doing, it's there has to be a point to it. There's no point in just going, right, I'm going to do jokes for an hour, because, hey, I've got no problem. I've got nothing against comedians who just do that, and fair play to them, they've got great jokes. But for me, there has to be a reason why I'm telling these jokes. And,
right.
Be something that an audience member who hasn't experienced someone with cerebral palsy, gives them something to think about, something to go, oh, okay, I didn't understand that before, I now have a better perspective on that. And not only for able-bodied people to go, oh, maybe we shouldn't, bend over when we talk to them and tilt our heads and all that kind of nonsense. But also, if there was a young disabled person in my audience, for them to go, yeah, finally someone is telling my story. I think that's the big thing for me right now. And it's not necessarily just about the disability. There's obviously more to me than just being a disabled person. But right now, that's the thing I'm sort of focusing most.
What's very interesting, and I completely agree with you, is that I recently saw you at the Hastings Fringe, and that's immediately what came along. You were there to say what you wanted to say and get your point across to the audience, regardless of everything else around you. As soon as you walked on, you were determined to make that audience laugh and listen, and that was wonderful to see.
Yeah, I mean, thank you very much. It's very kind. And one of the reasons why that show went really well is your very loud laugh.
It wasn't just me.
Very kind of you to say. But no, I mean, look, I agree. Like, I think the big thing for me is I think they sort of when you say make people laugh and make people listen, I think it's a very good point that you raise, and I think they are very much intertwined. Like, if you want people to listen,
Yeah.
make them laugh, and if you want to make people laugh, give them something to listen to. I struggle to listen to one line after one line after one liner for an hour, and like, you can have some of the best one-liners ever. You know, at some point during that show, I am going to check my watch.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if I go see a show that has a point, has something that they're trying to say, and is incredibly funny at the same time, that's when I'm going to be most engaged.
That's the magic, isn't it? When it all clicks. Yeah, yeah. Tell me about your writing process, if you've got one, for a routine or a show.
Sure. So it changes depending on the show. So my first show was like a collection of everything that I'd written up until that point, and then, you know, there was a story, and it just sort of happened that the story sort of happened chronologically, and it was quite easy to write in that sense. The show that I'm working on now that has gone was just, you know, I knew what I wanted to talk about, and it was really about developing the bit. And also, I had the whole of lockdown to work on it and to move things around and try different bits out. So for me, the big thing is I always start with like a vague idea of what I want to talk about. Most of the stuff I talk about is stories and things that have happened to me, right? So most of the time, it'll go, okay, this thing happened to me. Let me go to a new material night, or when I have a preview, go, right, I want to just tell that story like I would tell it down the pub or to one of my friends or whatever, right? And then I listen back, I record everything I do, listen back to it. I record everything I do, I don't always listen back. If it's a rubbish gig, I don't bother listening back. Which is a key bit of advice for any new comedian. Do that. It really does make a difference. But you listen back, and then you go, okay, the thing about comedy that people don't sort of necessarily realise when they're watching a comedian on stage is that we have direct feedback from an audience every time we do a show. So, you know, we go to a new material night, say I do a story, and half of the things I say get a laugh, and then half the things I say don't. The next time I tell that story, I can change all of the things that don't get a laugh, or the wording, or any kind of joke mechanics in it, to go, okay, well, actually, instead of saying that happened, you could say, no, honestly, guys, that really did happen, or something as small as that, and then you can eke out a laugh out of that. And so my point is, you get direct feedback on what you say and how you say it, to the point where you can just edit. Like, something happens, I say it on stage, I listen back to it, I edit, I say it on stage. It's not as complicated as I've made it sound. But luckily, a lot of stupid things happen to me, as you can attest from going to see that show, that I don't have to do a huge amount of writing. When people say they want to heal me, I'm like, right, that's going to be 10 minutes of the Edinburgh show sorted.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah.
So the use of the mobile phone when you put it down on the stage is paramount, because, as you say, you can reword everything.
Absolutely.
You can tweak it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about it, you do get the direct feedback, right?
Yeah.
And that's brilliant. And like, some people can just be very objective with that when they're on stage. I think it's such a subjective thing, right? My favourite thing in the world is being on stage.
Yeah.
I could be having the worst day, and I get on stage and I don't care, and it all goes, and it's just a huge wave of dopamine, and like, oh my god, these people are laughing at thoughts that I've had that I've turned into jokes.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, and obviously when you get that, and I'm not denying that's wonderful, but my point is that if you do that and you try and judge it based on that subjective nature, it's very hard to do so. Whereas if you put your phone down and then you can just enjoy the show, say everything you want, get all the big dopamine hit, take your long car ride home, chill, and then the next day you can then go back and listen to it without that sort of subjectivity to it. Be like, actually, this bit was funny and this bit wasn't. So you can tweak it from that. And that's where having a mobile phone on stage recording stuff helps. But
a lot of comedians I've seen do it, and one of my favourite stories recently, a couple of months ago, I went to see Lily Phillips, who is just wonderful, and I see her quite regularly. And we were at 2 North Down, and she walked onto the stage with the mobile phone, put it right down in front of me, and looked at me and went, "I'm going to have a great night tonight." And my laugh would carry. But of course, I was there just thinking, "Oh, the mobile phones." But she was calculating what was getting laughs and what wasn't from what was being recorded on the mobile phone. It was fascinating to use a prop as a way to get a laugh, as well as for pivotal reasons.
Yeah, Sarah Silverman used to do this thing where she would have notes on stage with her, and then she would say something awful, really dark and horrific, and then have a go at the notes, like it was the notes' fault that she said that, like that Brilliant. She hadn't written. There's something similar to that. Yeah,
that is really superb. I recently.
Before we move on, what I find interesting is that this last show that I've done and the show that I'm thinking about next comes from a place where my first show I had a lot of material and I was like, okay, let's make this into a story. These upcoming shows are much more, okay, what do I want to talk about? So the upcoming show is still not fully decided on, and if this has changed by the time you're listening to it, sorry, but the initial plan, people of the future, the show is going to be called Baby Steps, and I'm going to be performing the show on my feet, and I'm going to be on my feet for the entire hour, and I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. I don't know if I can do that. Like physically, I have no clue. I've not tried it yet. But that's the plan, and the theory of the show is I'm going to be doing things that I've never done before, and so.
Well, I wish you well with it. I think it's very brave of you to do it, but I think if you pull it off, it's fantastic. And the reason why you're mentioning future and all the rest of it is that we are recording this interview in summer 22, and it may not go out until 2023. So we go.
That assumes that the world's still going to be alive.
Yes,
if you're
of course.
Hearing this, congratulations for making it through the night.
Indeed. Let's indeed move on. I recently saw you at the Hastings Comedy Fringe, where I thought you were absolutely wonderful. What do you think makes a good comedian?
It's a good question. I don't think there's one thing necessarily, because obviously there's so many different types of comics and what works for different people and different things. I think the biggest thing for me, and I think the easiest way for me to explain when I felt like I was becoming a good comedian, because I don't think I'm almost there. I still think I've got a lot of room to go and I've got much more potential to fulfill. But like, I think for me, when I started doing the comedy that I wanted to go see, it made a huge difference, and it meant that I could then be a better judge of that comedy. Because when I first started, I was doing like an impression of a comedian, and I was doing the things that I thought comedians had to do. Whereas as I've got more experienced, as I've got more comfortable, as I've got, this to be my full-time job, and I can now just go on stage and think, okay, no matter what happens here, I know I have the skills and the capability to be able to deal with it and to be able to produce jokes that audiences find funny.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing about it was when I went to Edinburgh when was it? 2018. I did a show all about Harry Potter. And I'm a massive Harry Potter fan, not a fan of the author, but we'll
Yes.
but this was before we knew any of that stuff, guys. I cannot stress that enough. But I knew I wanted to do a Harry Potter themed show, right?
Yeah.
And I knew that as a fan of comedy, if I was at the Edinburgh Fringe and I wasn't a comedian and someone said, I'm doing a show about whether or not I love Harry Potter more than I love my girlfriend, I would absolutely go see that show. And I knew what I wanted as an audience member for that show, so I was able to write it as a comic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think understanding that and then going, oh, I can actually write comedy for me, and then I'll be able to judge whether it's good or not, rather than going, well, I'll just try and figure out, I'll write stuff that I think people will be interested in.
That's fascinating. That really is. Are you saying then what? I think you've touched on this. Was there a point in your comedy career where you thought, I can do this? I can do this well. Is that point when you thought you could write about what you wanted to say?
It's a good question. Actually, to be honest, I think I see it as sort of two levels. So, the first time where I thought, oh, I can do this as my job, and this isn't just a pipe dream or a hobby or anything, I've got some real potential here, was when I was in the BBC New Comedian of the Year award in 2017.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's 5 years ago and I'm still banging on about it.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You were there.
I was there. I was a finalist. It was amazing fun.
Good man.
That was the first time I was like, oh, actually, this makes sense.
Yeah.
That, I have got some potential in this. It's not just a case of that subjectivity, I was talking about, that I go on stage and I get the laughs and I love that, so therefore those laughs must be the loudest. Whereas, you apply to a competition that, 600 people get applied to and you end up in the top 6, you must be doing something right. So that was sort of the first point where I was like, I think I can do this. And then I think your point of when I realised that I should be writing for myself and writing what I want to talk about was just another step up of oh, this is how I grow from a side of, now that I'm a pro comic and that it's all that I do in order to feed and clothe myself, how do I be the best version of that? That was another leap up, but that initial confidence boost of getting through to that final in 2017 was that initial starting point of oh, actually I can do this.
Brilliant. What's your view of competitions? Did you think that it helped you at all? I mean, I'm not just talking about yourself. Do you think it's a good thing to have them? Is it a good thing for comedians?
Yeah, so it's one of those things that is it's quite a complex issue, and I'm very glad that this question is not yes or no. It's a good thing. I think overall, and I say this as someone who has been successful in competitions and someone who has not been successful in competitions, I think as much as we would all love for comedy not to be competitive and to be completely subjective, and that, if you go to a standard comedy club night where you have an MC, an opener, 2 middles and a closer, it's not a competition to see who's funniest. everyone is contributing to everybody having a good time. The better the MC does, the better the opening act does, the better the middle does, the better the middle does, the better the closer does, right? And the better time the audience has, and that's what we're here to do, is to make sure that people who come to a comedy club end far happier than they did when they walked into the door. So in an ideal world, comedy wouldn't be competitive. But it is. It's a competitive industry. Lots of people want to do it. And I think the most successful I've been within comedy competitions is when I've not treated it competitively and I've not got in my own head about it. But what I would say is comedy competitions are very useful to your career if you do well in them.
Yeah.
So the fact that I did well in the BBC, the fact that I did well in Jewish Comedian of the Year 2017, these things took me not like a huge jump, but it got me from promoters not even watching my video to promoters watching my video.
Sure.
My video was then good because it came off the BBC, and then when you start doing well at the gigs, that's when you start getting booked more and more. But that little jump of being nobody to being somebody came from me for being a finalist in one competition and a winner in another, right? The thing I would say is if you do badly in a competition, nobody knows, nobody cares. So it's kind of like a free swing. If you go into a competition knowing that if you go and do well, it could be beneficial to your career, great. If you do badly, it has no detrimental effect. And I think that's the key, and that's why I land on the side of competitions are good. So people know that I was in the BBC in 2017. They don't need to know that I didn't make the quarterfinals. Who could be in the year the follow in 2018. I reveal it now because it's not a big deal. But I've always it's a great competition.
At the time it was, but not now.
Exactly. Yeah. But the 2018 heats were the creme de la creme of comedy.
Yeah.
But my point is that if you do well in them, great. If you don't, it doesn't matter at all. There are people that were in my heat for the BBC, and I can tell you have been definitively way more successful than I am.
Oh.
And they didn't get through it. It's not I'll tell you after who I'm referring to. But,
yeah, please do.
These people have been on serious TV shows in the country, are touring, are real bloody good acts.
Yeah.
And they just didn't make it through for whatever reason. It didn't have any kind of negative impact on their career. But me doing well in it had a positive impact on my career.
Brilliant. And I suppose following on from that in a way, to date, what's been your best and worst comedy gig? I can't believe you've had a bad gig because you're such a funny man.
Thank you. You are very wrong. I'll tell the good gig first because that's less fun story. It's just bragging, really. So when I did the Russell Howard show, that was the best gig I've ever had.
Brilliant.
Because the scope for that going well compared to that going badly is so much more exaggerated. If you do a gig in front of 100 people on a Saturday night and you don't do well, 100 people don't think you're great at comedy. Fine. All right, move on. But if you go on TV and do badly and they can't edit it in any way so it's good, then you're in real trouble. And you can't ignore that. And then, I don't know if you've seen the clip or not, but it didn't go according to the script.
I have seen it.
But it did. But it was just one of those. I was able to roll with punches in it, and it's just a magic moment.
Yeah.
And I could have never have planned that. And if that happened, it was the first time it's ever happened. And for me to handle it the way I did meant that that clip that went viral, but also I could never recreate that.
No.
If that happened ever again.
It's of the
I can't do
moment,
that.
isn't it? Yeah.
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 And so for that lightning in a bottle to be caught on camera and then be able to be put on TV and then put online and all that kind of stuff, it was really, really great.
Brilliant.
And now that I've shown that I am a good comedian, let me tell you about the time I died in my arse. So, this was in a tiny place in Cambridgeshire.
Right.
And it was a social club. And it was the first time in my career where I had been asked to do the gig. Up until that point, I'd had quite a little bit of paid work, but it was always, there was a post on the Facebook comedy forum, I would apply for it and I would get the job, right? No one was coming to me and emailing me going, hey, we'd like you to do our gig, right? And so I got this email saying, we'd like you to be on our gig. It's probably £100, I think. We want you to do 20 minutes in the middle, and it's in this little village in Cambridgeshire. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great, absolutely. And so it was this tiny, tiny little village. To give you an idea of how small this village is, the Barbers in this village was called the Barbers. They only had one. They don't need another, because nobody inside that village ever leaves and no one outside ever comes in.
Brilliant.
Right?
And there's your comedy
bubble.
Audience.
Yeah, they were in a lockdown bubble before 2020. They were just getting ready. So, I went there. I was very excited that they'd asked me to do it, right? I then got to the venue, and it was a really long, thin room, right? And I was thinking, okay, this is doable. I think I'm either going to fly or I'm going to die. And that was my first thought when I got in the room. Compare goes on. Ben Vandervelde does a great job, right? He's a great MC. He's been doing it a very long time. Very funny man.
Yeah.
That's great. Opening act comes on. Jelly Collier, great act. She does well.
Brilliant.
Right. Interval. During the interval, I realised that I'm not going to be able to get from the back of the room to the front of the room because of my chair, because of how many people there are in this room.
Oh my God.
And so what I realised that I'd go, okay, during the interval, I just pushed, I pushed through because there wasn't so many people, and I just sat myself in front of these, there was a table with 2 women on it, and I just sat myself there, right? And sort of 2 minutes before the show recommenced, they sort of sat back down and they were like, sorry, you were right. And I went, yeah, sorry, I'm just going to go on stage next. And obviously I can't get from the back of the stage. So is it cool if I just hang out here? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. And they then asked me the question, do you get nervous before you go on stage? Now, before I tell you my answer to that question, Rich, I do need to point out that they were 2 very attractive women, which heavily influenced my answer. Because instead of going, yeah, I mean a little bit, but you know, it is what it is, that's part of it, I went, nah, of course I don't anymore. I'm really good at comedy now.
Wow.
And at that moment, I went, oh, you're going to die on your ass for 20 minutes now. And I was so sure I was going to die at that. Like, a lot of people have talked about like going on stage and doing something really early and then dying. I managed to die before I was even on stage.
That is a first. That is a first.
So Ben then comes on, introduces me, and I did. I died on my arse 20 minutes solid, right? But I didn't know that you could do sort of like 15 to 17 if you're not having a good time. So I was like, I've been told I've got to do 20, I'm doing 20, right? Did the 20, hardest 20 of my life, died on my ass. And I went, I'm in Aaron Simmons, thank you very much, goodbye, right? Before I could get off stage, right, Ben jumps on stage and went, Aaron, before you go, we still need you on stage. And I was like, I've known Ben for a year or 2 at this stage. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, mate? I want to get off this stage. I want to crawl into a hole and never be seen by another human being ever again. No, you need to stay here, you need to stay here. They invited the owner of the social club on stage, and then he was like, thank you so much for coming. Wasn't he great? And then, like, one clap. Like, oh, yeah, well done, yeah. And he's like, so the reason why we invited you down tonight was because we have just installed a disabled toilet.
Oh, no.
And we would like you to christen the toilet for us.
No.
And so, after dying on my arse for 20 minutes, I then had to go and cut a ribbon.
No.
Paul Sinhar cut the ribbon, and then I had to go into the toilet and pretend to do a piss in front of hundreds of people who would just see me die on my arse.
Just get me out of there. That's awful.
I thought they wanted me for my comedy. They just wanted me to
Wow.
to take a piss.
That is a great story, but very unfortunate.
Yeah, like it's one of those things that I'm sure the story eventually will overtake the experience.
Yeah.
But at the minute, it still hurts.
Wow. You mentioned Russell Howard. I saw him just as he was taking off at Edinburgh, and I'd just bought a new mobile phone. And as soon as he bounded on stage, I couldn't switch the damn thing off. And my friend was ringing me outside. He just took the piss out of me for the hour, and said this was comedy gold. I went, well, I'm panicking. I don't know. And
it's so great, Russ.
He's brilliant. He was so. It's very quick-witted. Very quick-witted.
What I found fascinating watching the show is it's done in front of a live audience.
Yeah.
There are 300 people there. And he has jokes on the auto cue that's been written and that he's worked on during the week.
Yeah.
And it's only when he gets on stage, he'll do all the jokes and he goes, no, actually, I've thought of something better. Let's do that again. In the moment when he's telling these jokes that he's written, he's thought of something funnier.
Yeah.
Still delivers the jokes he's written, which are already really funny.
That's superb.
And then delivers a far better joke afterwards. He's like, see, I told you that was funnier. And it's just like, how can you do that?
He's
recording a TV show that he's in charge of.
He's taking idea from Ben Elton. We saw Ben Elton in the 80s when I was at college. I saw him twice. I saw him at Stoke when I was at college, and then in Carlisle about a month later. And he was judging his audience, and he must have had a wealth of material because he based each show on the specific audience. So at college it was all about students. In Carlisle it was all about living in such a remote place, which it is because it's right at the top of the country. And he was fantastic. He was so good because it was a different show. And I was going to move on to well, you've answered it. How do you cope with any nerves before you go on stage, and how do you remember all your routines?
So my first bit of advice is don't tell to attractive people that you're going to do brilliant. Probably won't. So I don't get a huge amount of nerves now.
No.
Like, genuinely. Like I still get nervous before big gigs or you know, like the telly stuff where you have less control on what you do and all that kind of stuff. In terms of remembering material, I don't really have sort of any sage bit of advice or anything like that. Like I've generally got quite a good memory. Like I don't write things down. Like when I write things down, they stop being funny to me.
Yeah.
So I don't like to be too scripted, and you know I just rely on the fact that I've said them before, and also you need to trust the fact that if you're telling us, it's very different if you're a joke teller, right? And you're punchline set up punchline. Like that's harder to do than what I do. Like I have a set list for my Edinburgh show, which is an hour long, which is less than an A5 piece of paper, because I have a 10-minute story about Jesus and a 10-minute story about, or you know, this or that, or you know, disabled toilets or whatever, right? And so that's a lot easier. And so for me, I just go with the premise of, if I was in the pub with my mates, I mean, I don't go to the pub with my mates, I don't have any friends, but theoretically, if I were doing that and someone went, "Oh, Aaron, tell that story about the time you had sex in a disabled toilet," I would like, okay, I know how to tell the story. In terms of the nerves, I do have a genuine piece of advice that I found very useful at the beginning of my career. And it's very simple. It's 2 deep breaths. Because the first one will not be deep enough. And then the second one is when you actually have a deep breath. So
wow.
that made a huge difference for me. And just having that. And I also watched a TED Talk by Deborah Francis White on stage fright, and I thought it was fascinating in terms of her mentality towards it, and like why public speaking is so scary to people, and essentially, I'm going to butcher it a little bit. If you're very interested in this idea, please go and find it, because she articulates it a lot better than I do. But the premise is, as we were growing up on the savannah as evolving humans, there are only 2 scenarios in which you are facing one direction and everybody else is facing another, right? So in the situation that you are on stage, you are facing out, everybody else is facing in. Evolutionarily speaking, there are 2 examples where that could be. Option A is that you are lunch, right? And you are a hyena, and there are a whole bunch of lions, right? That's option A. Option B is that you are king of the pride, and you are also a lion. And so that mentality of going, oh, hang on, if I act like I'm in charge and being in control of that situation, it makes a huge difference to how the audience reacts, how you feel comfortable all of a sudden. And like, she actually in the TED Talk can make herself so nervous that she starts shaking. And for me, what I found interesting early on in my career was people said I always looked really calm on stage, but that was because I was sat down. So I wasn't moving around or hiding behind a mic stand. I was sat in my chair, which I'm very comfortable in. I spent a huge amount of time in it. But just, if I would lean on a wheel, that's as much performative as it was comfort. And so it just put the audience at ease. And I think that kind of thing, obviously I'm not suggesting that everybody get in a wheelchair, it'll be easier, mainly because I want to keep my niche. But I just think finding the thing that makes you feel calm and confident and in control on stage is what stops those nerves from becoming bigger and more impactful.
That is fascinating, because the 2 stories that come to mind for me, I wrote a play that was the most creative thing I ever did other than the blog, and we put it on for Comic Relief, and it was all about me and my successful girlfriend, and I didn't have a job, come down to London from Carlisle, and it was a really good idea. And I ran out, and I accidentally wrote a series of, I say accidentally, I had to write a series of monologues, because it was basically, he was trying to get a job, the character, he was in a waiting room, and he looked to the audience, started chatting to them, and then the interviewer comes on and interviews him. So the first night we did this, I ran out and I forgot my lines. And I was like a rabbit in headlight. I just thought, take me to the pub now, or get me out of this. And it was so, because we'd rehearsed so much for it. And then, of course, the other 2 nights didn't miss a beat. So that did. But the other thing is, sitting in audiences for years and years, I would never sit near the front, because I just thought, well, my laugh, they can hear my laugh if they want to hear it. But when I went to Certainly Always Be Comedy, which is the club I go to every week just about, they had a space on the front row, and he's very, very warm there, the compere, James Gill, because he just chats to the audience and he gets everybody in. And the next thing, I'm up on stage singing with him. And of course, the joke is I can't sing a note. So I thought my confidence is flying through the roof here. And hence the blog happened and this podcast. And it's fascinating if you analyse why the audience are there, why the comedians are there. You know, it's a whole different thing. And what's not to love about the whole genre of it, because it's so positive, you know.
Yeah, I mean, so I can very much empathise with you. I'm better at walking than I am at singing. And I've sung in front of 750 people, and they wanted me to walk. So yeah, absolutely. Like that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like I don't get people who are like, yeah, I'm just not that into comedy.
Can't do. No. You've got to like somebody. Very much so. Let's move on to Edinburgh. I spend my holidays every year going to the Edinburgh Fringe, and I've been going since 2005, and I see about 50 shows in a week. I'm exhausted, but I love it. Tell me about your first Edinburgh Festival and what was it like? What year was it? What did you do there?
So I've been going every year since 2014. 2020 and 21 excluded.
Yes, of course.
For reasons.
Yeah.
2014, I went up just to watch shows. It was our last family holiday together. Me, my mum and dad, and my brother all went up. Like we booked the holiday before I decided I was going to do my first ever gig. So I'd done 3 gigs before we went up. And then I came back. Actually, I'd done 2 gigs. Before we went up. And that was just great. We just watched a whole bunch of shows. And I mean, it was tricky because I brought an electric wheelchair with me rather than a manual wheelchair. Which, yeah, Edinburgh is tricky for wheelchair users.
Too many hills.
Yeah, it's genuinely. Why don't get that right? Edinburgh is 80% uphill, right? It's like a fucking Escher painting. It makes no sense. Like, I get that if you go from A to B, that can be uphill, right?
Yeah.
But what I don't get is if you go from B to A, on the way back, it is still uphill. Like, it makes no sense whatsoever. But yeah, so I went up to just watch for that first weekend, and we went as a family. And we just saw as much as we possibly could. And then the first couple of fringes, so 15 and 16, I went up for a weekend, just did a whole bunch of open spots.
Yeah.
Just me, just going to see as much as I could, performing as much as I could. And then 2017 was my first like mini run where I did sort of 10 days.
Right.
Did my own show. That went really well. That one, I mean, it wasn't. The show itself was like fine, but like I did okay, and like I realised I could fly quite well, and that I was doing the BBC stuff, so that was really exciting. And then 2018 was the first time I did a whole run, doing my Harry Potter show. That was very exciting. That went really well. That was way better than I thought it would be. I mean, look, I don't claim it's because of me. I claim it's the success of Harry Potter. It's a very popular book genre. Book genre? Just book?
Yeah.
So then, after that, I then did my debut hour in 2019. And, yeah, that was really, really fun, and that meant a lot. But in terms of, like, my first Edinburgh experience, and the most fun thing you do as a comic is go to Edinburgh for like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And perform more comedy than you will do in a month. See more comedy than you will do in a month. And try and learn as much as possible.
Yeah.
Like, and it's the same now. So like this year, 6 months ago, we recorded this before Edinburgh, but you guys are hearing it after it. It went brilliantly. Oh my god, I can't believe
Yeah.
I won commentary.
Well, your anticipated show that I've seen is superb. This
No,
this is
I'm not
Hot
going there
Wheels,
to win
isn't
anything.
it? Yeah.
But my point is, this year I'm doing 3 shows a day. Right?
Wow.
So I know it's insane. It's not a smart.
That's incredible.
But the thing about it, if I have a good week and I gig 5 nights a week, which is usually my standard, gigging for 20 minutes a day, I am on stage for an hour in total.
Yeah.
Right? Every day I'm going to be on stage for 2.5 hours.
Wow.
Minimum.
You will be exhausted.
Yes, I plan on sleeping for the entirety of September.
You will be absolutely shot. I mean, I think I'm doing well at 55, doing 50 shows. They push me around, because I am shattered going up those hills. But it's the experience of going. You step off the train at Waverley, and the enthusiasm just there just hits you, and you think this is amazing. And
that is so true. And it's going to be slightly different this year. And maybe I'll text you, say, can you include this on the podcast? It was an absolute disaster. Never do 3 shows ever again.
Well, I wish you well.
The way I've planned out, I think I'm going to be okay. I'm driving up to Edinburgh this year, so I'm going to have my car.
Right.
So I'm not going to be pushing everywhere. So I am looking after myself. I've sort of already got I've got a couple of days off. I've sort of got plans of what I'm going to do for that. But it's just a case of, I just want to get the reason why I'm going to Edinburgh is to get better as a comic.
Yeah,
and if
of course. Yeah, it's all about the experience.
And you don't get better. Yeah. There's a question that you need to be asking yourself of whether you can get any better than you are.
Yeah.
So, I'm very excited about it.
Well, do let me know. Do let me know the 3 shows, because I will come and see you, my friend.
Fantastic.
Definitely. Who are your favourite comedians, past and present?
So, present is very easy. James Acaster is just the funniest person on the planet.
He's incredible, isn't he? Yeah.
He is so phenomenal at what he does, but also he can do everything else as well.
Yeah,
His brain works so quickly that he can compute it as himself and then go, oh, it'd be funnier if I did it like this, or I acted like this guy, or I'll pretend to be a genie because, why not?
Yeah.
Comedy is so easy for him that it appears to be.
Totally.
He can just do it in any form that he wants to.
Totally.
And I think he's phenomenal.
He is one of the greatest, I think, now.
Yeah. And then, in terms of past, the one that had sort of the biggest influence on me growing up was Eddie Izzard.
Wow. Brilliant. So yeah.
When I was maybe 10, 11, maybe, my uncle gave us 3 VHSs, 2 of which were Eddie, which were Just to Kill and I can't remember the name of the other one. That's going to annoy me. But we had 2 of Eddie's stand-up specials and a Frank Skinner's stand-up special, and I watched them so much.
He's superb. To take one word and run with it is extraordinary.
Yeah, and I just remember those shows so vividly. And obviously, my style and Eddie's chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
But I just remember just crying with laughter.
That's so good. There is a section in my blog, a testimonial section, and all the comedians and my family and all the rest of them have been very kind, putting nice words in. And but the funniest one by a mile is James Acaster, who wrote, if I wasn't a comedian, I would happily sit next to Richard Gill all day and make him laugh. I mean, that's priceless. And we saw Eddie Izzard just a couple of weeks ago. I had Barry Cryer on this podcast. It was extraordinary. And the dear legend left us in January. and they had a celebration night run by his son, and Izzard did 10 minutes, and it was just superb. Just the way that he saunters onto the stage without a care in the world, and then bang, he's away. He's just amazing. It's a great choice. Like me, do you go to a lot of stand-up comedy shows as a member of the audience?
I mean, not as much as I would actually, you would think. I actually sort of very much, I get a lot of FOMO. So if I go to a comedy night and I'm not performing, I get quite sad that I'm not performing.
Yeah, I think that's called ego, my friend.
I want to play. I've gone to a lot of previews this year because I'm going to be so busy in Edinburgh. I'm not going to be able to go see people as much as I would like.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to see the people that I really definitely want to see before Edinburgh. I think it's always fun as a comic to go and be like, hey, have you thought about doing this or doing this? Or, some of my best bits of my Edinburgh shows have come from other comics. So it's always quite nice to do that.
Brilliant.
But I always try and stick around for the show.
Yeah.
I'm last, I try and get there at the beginning just so you watch it all. And unless I've got to drive home sort of 3-4 hours, like I will generally stay and watch.
That's good. That's great. My first ever gig at the age of 7, as a family, we went to see Les Dawson in Scarborough, and he was extraordinary. And then a year later, I saw Tommy Cooper, and I got the bug. And he was extraordinary. And I thought there's something here, and I just found a passion, a hobby, and hopefully the buzz of it all comes out in the blog, the enthused, so because I've seen so many, and I just love to go. There's nothing like it.
I mean, the blog is like who you are, and who you are is a very enthusiastic person, particularly around about everything, but particularly around comedy. And it just comes you say it's such a joyous thing.
It is.
Appreciation of it adds to that enjoyment, and it is certainly a huge thing, and it's the reason why I accepted to do this podcast. When you text me, I was like, yeah, of course, absolutely.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you so much. Just before we go, is there anything else you'd like to say? Where can people find you on social media? Have you got any gigs or a tour planned or podcasts or anything like that?
So, if I haven't given up social media by 2023, I'd like to. Fucking hate it, but sure, it's part of the job. It's at Rolling Comedian. Rolling down a hill, not J.K. Rowling. Need to be clear these days. So that's where I'm on social media. In terms of what I'm doing in 2023, I don't know. As I say, there is a very, very good chance I will be going to Edinburgh in 2023. So if anybody's going to that, look out for me there. I think it's going to be called Aaron Simmons Baby Steps. Yeah. But we are literally over a year away from it, so I haven't settled on the title yet. Even to have an idea for a title is far in advance.
Well, it's privileged that the idea is sown here.
Yeah. So that's potentially there. Hopefully, if Edinburgh goes well, there might be a mini tour.
Wow.
Of this show, and might be doing it in conjunction with the Harry Potter tour. The show. So, yeah, all of that stuff will be on my website, which is aaronsimmonscomedy.com. And, yeah, just, drop me a text.
Well, my friend...
to be honest, if you message me on Twitter, it's the same thing. It's not a problem.
Well, it's been an absolute joy talking to you for the last hour, and I can't wait to come and see you again soon. And I wish you all the very best with the Edinburgh run and everything you do in future. It's been a joy, my friend.
Thank you very much. Pleasure's all mine.
Take care and all the best to you.
See you later, mate.
Thanks now.